Professor Alastair Thompson was a legend, at least in the hallowed halls of Harvard University's mathematics department. His office, overflowing with books and papers covered in complex equations, was a testament to his intellectual prowess. He wasn't just brilliant, he knew he was brilliant. His lectures were less about teaching and more about showcasing his own dazzling mind. He had a knack for solving problems that left other mathematicians scratching their heads for years. But Professor Thompson also had a reputation. Some whispered that he was arrogant, a bit too quick to dismiss ideas that weren't his own. He had a habit of making grand, sweeping pronouncements, often prefacing them with phrases like, "It's simply impossible," or "No one has ever." And no one ever will. These bold statements were usually followed by a smug smile and a challenging glint in his eye. He thrived on intellectual challenges, particularly those he deemed unsolvable by anyone but himself. It wasn't enough to be right, he needed to be spectacularly right, demonstrating his superior intellect to anyone within earshot. This attitude, while grating to some, also pushed him to explore the very limits of mathematical understanding. He relished the opportunity to present a problem so difficult, so seemingly insurmountable, that it would silence even the most confident of his students. Little did he know his next impossible problem would lead to a most unexpected challenge, one that would come not from a fellow academic, but from a source he would never have anticipated. The air in the lecture hall crackled with anticipation. Professor Thompson, a mischievous glint in his eye, stood before his advanced mathematical concepts class. He wrote a complex equation across the massive whiteboard, a swirling mess of Greek letters, exponents, and integrals that seemed to defy comprehension. He turned to face the students, his gaze sweeping over the sea of expectant faces. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice resonating through the room, "this problem has vexed mathematicians for decades. It requires techniques far beyond the scope of elementary mathematics." He paused for dramatic effect. "Indeed, I posit that it is impossible to solve using only the tools you've learned thus far." A murmur rippled through the class. These were some of the brightest mathematical minds in the country, and the suggestion that a problem was beyond their reach was both daunting and intriguing. Several students immediately began scribbling notes, eager to prove the professor wrong. Others looked on with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Professor Thompson leaned against the whiteboard, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "I encourage you to try," he said, his voice laced with challenge. "But I assure you, you will find yourselves facing a brick wall. This is a problem for the ages, a testament to the limits of simple logic." He then added, almost as an afterthought, "Of course, if anyone does manage to crack it using mere arithmetic, I will personally buy them dinner at the fanciest restaurant in Boston." He chuckled, confident that his wallet was safe. He had no idea that a 10-year-old was about to order the most expensive steak on the menu. Meanwhile, miles away from the hallowed halls of Harvard, life moved at a much simpler pace inside the brightly colored walls of Oakwood Elementary School. 10-year-old Alex sat slumped in his fourth-grade classroom, his mind wandering far from the day's lesson on fractions. He wasn't struggling, quite the opposite. The material was far too easy for him. Alex saw numbers differently than most kids. Where others saw simple calculations, Alex saw patterns, connections, and hidden possibilities. Math wasn't just a subject for him, it was a playground, a world of endless exploration. He devoured math textbooks like others devoured comic books, solving problems for fun and delighting in the elegance of a perfect equation. But in class, Alex was perpetually bored. He finished his assignments in minutes, then doodled elaborate geometric designs in the margins of his notebooks, waiting for the lesson to finally end. The ticking of the classroom clock seemed to mock him, each second stretching into an eternity. He yearned for a challenge, a problem that would truly engage his mind. He often imagined himself as a mathematical superhero, battling evil forces with the power of prime numbers and defeating villains with cleverly constructed algorithms. He dreamed of tackling problems that no one else could solve, of pushing the boundaries of mathematical knowledge. He had no idea that his dream was about to come true, and that the impossible problem posed by a Harvard professor was about to land right in his lap. His days of elementary school boredom were numbered. Ms. Evans, a kind and enthusiastic teacher with a warm smile and a genuine love for her students, remembered her own days struggling through Professor Thompson's notoriously difficult lectures. She had survived, earning her degree and eventually finding her calling in elementary education. She admired Professor Thompson's brilliance, even if she found his arrogance a bit off-putting. One day, during a staff meeting, Ms. Evans overheard a conversation about the impossible problem Thompson had presented to his class. Intrigued, She tracked down the equation and, remembering Alex's exceptional mathematical abilities, decided to share it with her fourth-grade class. "Okay, class," she announced, writing the complex equation on the whiteboard. "This is a super tricky problem that even college students are having trouble with. Don't worry if you can't solve it. I just thought it would be a fun challenge to get your brains working." She emphasized the fun part, not wanting to discourage anyone. Secretly, she hoped Alex might find it stimulating, a welcome distraction from the monotony of fractions. Ms. Evans certainly didn't expect any of her students to actually solve the problem. She viewed it as a thought experiment, a way to introduce them to the idea that some problems require creativity and persistence even if a solution seems impossible. She had no idea that she had just handed Alex the key to unlocking his mathematical potential and, in the process, challenging the assumptions of one of the world's leading mathematicians. The game was on. The moment Alex saw the equation on the board, a spark ignited within him. It wasn't just a problem, it was a puzzle, a riddle, a tantalizing mystery begging to be solved. While the other students glanced at it with mild curiosity before returning to their coloring books, Alex was already captivated. The complex symbols seemed to dance before his eyes, whispering secrets and promising a thrilling intellectual adventure. Recess was usually a time for kickball and tag, but today Alex barely noticed his friends. He grabbed a piece of chalk and copied the equation onto the blacktop, muttering to himself as he circled different parts and scribbled potential solutions in the margins. He barely registered the shouts and laughter of the other children. His entire world had shrunk to the confines of that chalk-covered square. After school, the obsession continued. He filled notebook after notebook with calculations, his tiny hand flying across the pages. He covered his bedroom walls with sticky notes, each containing a different approach or a potential solution. He ate dinner distractedly, his mind still wrestling with the problem even as he chewed. Sleep offered little respite. The equation haunted his dreams, swirling and morphing into bizarre, abstract shapes. He was completely consumed, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a burning desire to conquer the impossible. The challenge had been issued, and Alex was determined to answer it. Days turned into weeks, and Alex's pursuit of the solution became a roller coaster of exhilaration and frustration. There were moments of intense concentration, where he felt like he was on the verge of a breakthrough, only to be followed by crushing disappointment when his calculations led to dead ends. Montage begins. We see Alex surrounded by stacks of papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. He tries different approaches. Long division, multiplication, trying to simplify the equation. He erases furiously, starts over, and then crumples the paper in frustration. Next, we see him using Lego bricks to represent different numbers and equations, physically manipulating them to try and find a pattern. He arranges them in rows and columns, trying to visualize the relationships between the variables. Another scene shows him using oranges and apples to demonstrate a part of the problem. He slices the fruit, trying to understand the fractions and ratios involved. He gets juice all over his hands, but he doesn't even notice. Then we see him pacing back and forth in his room, muttering to himself, running his hands through his hair. He throws his pencil down in exasperation, but then picks it up again, determined to keep trying. The montage speeds up, showing Alex tirelessly working day and night, fueled by an unwavering determination to solve the impossible. He may be frustrated, but he refuses to give up. He knows deep down that the solution is out there waiting to be discovered. Montage ends. One rainy afternoon, as Alex stared blankly at the equation, a completely different way of looking at the problem flashed in his mind. It wasn't about complex calculations or advanced theories, it was about simplifying, about finding the hidden core of the problem. He realized that a key component of the equation could be rearranged and factored in a way that eliminated much of the complexity. He saw a pattern, a hidden symmetry that had eluded him before. He grabbed his pencil, his hand trembling with excitement, and began to rewrite the equation, step by step, following his newfound insight. As he worked, the equation began to unravel, revealing a surprisingly simple solution. It was like peeling away layers of an onion, each layer revealing a simpler, more fundamental truth. He couldn't believe it. Could it really be this easy? Finally, after hours of intense focus, he arrived at the answer. It was a single, elegant number, a testament to the power of simple logic. He stared at it in disbelief, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had solved the impossible problem using nothing more than basic math principles and a clever twist of perspective. A huge grin spread across his face. He jumped up and down, whooping with joy. He couldn't wait to show Ms. Evans. He had a feeling Professor Thompson was about to get a very expensive dinner. The next morning, Alex practically vibrated with excitement as he walked into Ms. Evans' classroom. He clutched his notebook tightly, his heart pounding with anticipation. As soon as the bell rang, he rushed to her desk, barely able to contain himself. "Ms. Evans! Ms. Evans! I solved it," he exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with pride. He thrust the notebook towards her, pointing to the final answer. Ms. Evans smiled, initially thinking he was just excited about attempting the problem. "That's wonderful, Alex. Let's take a look." She glanced at the notebook and her smile faltered slightly. The equation, meticulously rewritten, was filled with calculations she barely understood. She was initially skeptical. Could a fourth grader really have solved a problem that stumped advanced mathematics students? It seemed impossible. She started to skim through his work, expecting to find a mistake, a misunderstanding. But as she followed his logic, step by step, a flicker of understanding began to dawn in her eyes. She recognized the clever rearrangement, the elegant factoring. She realized that Alex had found a brilliant, unconventional solution, one that bypassed the need for complex mathematical tools. Her skepticism quickly evaporated, replaced by astonishment and admiration. "Alex," she said, her voice filled with awe, "this is incredible. You actually did it." She looked at him with newfound respect. He wasn't just a bright student, he was a mathematical prodigy. She knew she had to show this to Professor Thompson. He wouldn't believe it. Armed with Alex's notebook, Ms. Evans nervously dialed Professor Thompson's office at Harvard. She knew this phone call would be difficult. She remembered his dismissive attitude towards ideas that didn't originate from him, and she worried he wouldn't take her seriously. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered, "Thompson." "Professor Thompson, this is Ms. Evans from Oakwood Elementary. I was a student of yours several years ago," she began tentatively. "Evans? Yes, I recall. What can I do for you?" His tone was polite but impatient. "Well, Professor, I shared the problem you presented to your advanced class with my fourth grade students as a fun challenge." "I see," he interrupted, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And I assume they found it suitably challenging." "Actually," Ms. Evans continued, taking a deep breath, "one of my students, a 10-year-old named Alex, believes he has found a solution." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ms. Evans could practically feel Professor Thompson's skepticism radiating through the phone. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with disbelief. "A 10-year-old? Solved the impossible problem? With all due respect, Ms. Evans, that's highly improbable." "I understand your skepticism, Professor," Ms. Evans replied, trying to remain calm. "But I've reviewed his work, and I believe he may have actually done it. His approach is unconventional but surprisingly effective." She held her breath, waiting for his response. This was going to be an uphill battle. Professor Thompson scoffed, though Ms. Evans couldn't see it. "Unconventional, you say? I highly doubt a 10-year-old possesses the mathematical maturity to grasp the nuances of this problem, let alone devise a novel solution." He paused, then added, "It's likely a lucky guess, or perhaps a misinterpretation of the problem itself." Ms. Evans, however, persisted. "Professor, I truly believe you should see his work. I understand your skepticism, but I think you'll be surprised." She knew she had to convince him, not just for Alex's sake, but also to prove that brilliance could come from anywhere, regardless of age or background. Thompson sighed audibly. "Ms. Evans, I'm a very busy man. I have lectures to prepare, research to conduct." "Just 15 minutes, Professor?" Ms. Evans pleaded. "That's all I ask. If you're not convinced after 15 minutes, we'll leave and never bother you again." Another long pause. Ms. Evans could almost hear the gears turning in Professor Thompson's mind. Finally, he relented. "Very well," he said, his voice grudging. "I have a free slot next Tuesday at 2 p.m. But I'm warning you, Ms. Evans, if this is a waste of my time." "Thank you, Professor," Ms. Evans exclaimed, relieved. "We'll be there." She hung up the phone, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling within her. She had secured the meeting, but now she had to prepare Alex for the lion's den. Professor Thompson, she knew, wouldn't be an easy audience. Tuesday arrived and Alex, dressed in his best, slightly too big button-down shirt, stood nervously outside Professor Thompson's office. Ms. Evans gave him an encouraging smile and a reassuring pat on the back before knocking on the door. "Come in," a voice boomed from within. They entered the office, which was even more chaotic than Ms. Evans remembered. Professor Thompson sat behind a large, cluttered desk, peering at them over his glasses with a skeptical expression. "So, this is the young prodigy," he said, his tone dripping with doubt. Alex, despite his nervousness, stood tall and met the professor's gaze. "Hello, Professor Thompson," he said politely. "I think I solved your problem." Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And how did you manage that, using your crayons?" Alex ignored the jab and confidently opened his notebook. "I realized that if you rearranged this part of the equation and factored it, you could simplify the whole thing." He pointed to the relevant steps, explaining his reasoning clearly and concisely. As Alex spoke, Professor Thompson's initial skepticism began to fade. He watched intently, his eyes widening as he followed Alex's logic. The simplicity of the solution was astonishing, almost embarrassingly obvious in retrospect. He had been so focused on complex methods that he had completely overlooked the elegant, elementary approach. By the time Alex finished, Professor Thompson was speechless. He stared at the solution, then at Alex, his face a mask of disbelief and grudging admiration. "Well, I'll be," he muttered under his breath. He had been wrong. Spectacularly wrong. And a 10-year-old had proven it. He slowly began to smile. The following day, Professor Thompson stood before his advanced mathematical concepts class, a noticeably different demeanor about him. The usual arrogance was replaced by a sense of humility. He cleared his throat and addressed the students. "Gentlemen," he began, "yesterday I made a rather bold statement regarding the unsolvability of a particular problem. I stated that it was impossible to solve using elementary methods." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the class. Professor Thompson admitting he was wrong? It was unheard of. A 10-year-old boy named Alex from Oakwood Elementary has not only solved the problem but has done so using a remarkably simple and elegant approach that completely eluded me. He wrote Alex's solution on the whiteboard, explaining each step with genuine admiration. "Alex's ingenuity serves as a valuable lesson to us all," he continued. "It reminds us that brilliance can be found in the most unexpected places and that we should never underestimate the power of a fresh perspective. I extend my sincerest congratulations to Alex and offer him my deepest apologies for my initial skepticism." He then announced that he would be personally funding a new scholarship at Oakwood Elementary in Alex's name to encourage young students to pursue their passion for mathematics. And, of course, he kept his promise about dinner. He took Alex and Ms. Evans to the fanciest restaurant in Boston and treated them to a feast fit for a king and a mathematical genius. He even let Alex order the most expensive steak on the menu. Professor Thompson had learned a valuable lesson and he was determined to make amends. News of Alex's achievement spread like wildfire. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with the headline, "10-year-old solves impossible problem, humbling Harvard professor." Television crews descended on Oakwood Elementary, eager to interview the young genius. Alex, initially shy and overwhelmed by the attention, quickly embraced his newfound role as a mathematical ambassador. He visited other schools, giving inspiring talks to students of all ages, encouraging them to pursue their passions and never be afraid to challenge themselves. He emphasized that math wasn't just about memorizing formulas and performing calculations, it was about creativity, problem-solving, and seeing the world in a different way. He showed them how he used everyday objects to visualize complex concepts and how he never gave up even when he faced setbacks. Alex became a local hero and inspiration to kids who had previously thought that greatness was reserved for adults or for those who fit a certain mold. He challenged the notion of who could achieve great things, proving that age was just a number and that anyone with passion, dedication, and a willingness to think outside the box could make a difference. His story resonated far beyond his small town. He received letters from kids all over the world, thanking him for inspiring them to pursue their dreams. He became a symbol of hope and possibility, demonstrating that even the most impossible challenges could be overcome with perseverance and a little bit of ingenuity. He was, quite simply, a kid who dared to dream big and proved that anything is possible. Professor Thompson's encounter with Alex was a turning point in his career and his life. He realized that his arrogance had blinded him to the potential of others and that his teaching style had stifled creativity rather than fostering it. He understood that true brilliance wasn't just about possessing knowledge, it was about inspiring and nurturing talent in others. He made a conscious effort to change his approach. He started listening more to his students, encouraging them to think outside the box and to challenge his own assumptions. He stopped making sweeping pronouncements and started asking more questions. He created a more collaborative learning environment where students felt comfortable sharing their ideas even if those ideas seemed unconventional. He also began to actively seek out and mentor young, promising mathematicians, visiting local schools and offering them opportunities to work on research projects at Harvard. He became a champion for young talent, recognizing that the future of mathematics depended on nurturing the next generation of thinkers. Professor Thompson's office, once a symbol of his intellectual isolation, became a hub of collaboration and innovation. He learned that true fulfillment came not from being the smartest person in the room but from helping others reach their full potential. He often thought of Alex, the 10-year-old who had taught him the most valuable lesson of his career, that humility and open-mindedness are essential ingredients for true intellectual growth. He even framed Alex's original solution and hung it on his office wall as a constant reminder. Years later, the lecture hall at Harvard was packed. The students buzzed with anticipation, eager to hear from the renowned mathematician, Dr. Alex Johnson. Yes, it was the same Alex who had once challenged Professor Thompson's impossible problem. Alex, now a confident and accomplished mathematician, stood before the audience, a warm smile on his face. He began his lecture by sharing the story of his journey, recounting the day he first encountered Professor Thompson's equation and the countless hours he spent trying to solve it. He emphasized the importance of perseverance, creativity, and challenging assumptions. Never be afraid to think differently, he urged the students. Never let anyone tell you that something is impossible. The only limits are the ones you set for yourself. He then dedicated his lecture to Ms. Evans, his fourth-grade teacher, acknowledging her unwavering support and her belief in his abilities. Ms. Evans saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. She gave me the confidence to pursue my passion and to believe that I could achieve anything I set my mind to. He also briefly acknowledged Professor Thompson, recognizing his early influence and the valuable lesson he had learned about humility. He knew that Professor Thompson's initial arrogance had ultimately inspired him to prove him wrong and that their unlikely encounter had changed both of their lives for the better. The lecture concluded with a standing ovation, a testament to Alex's extraordinary achievements and his inspiring message. As he looked out at the sea of faces, he knew that he had come full circle, from a bored fourth grader doodling in his notebook to a respected mathematician inspiring the next generation of thinkers. His journey had proven that even the most impossible dreams could come true with passion, perseverance, and a little bit of help from those who believe in you.